We're beginning to current Daf Masechtas Eruvin Daf Zayin. Begin 10 lines down at the top of the Yommi. Right? Our Gemara is in the middle of a discussion regarding a certain interesting movie that was made in the Hardah regarding what was called a movie often. Now, she is corresponds with Kalvik and Cheskel. So anytime Daf Achayim, some things we're going to speak about in today's Daf are, may we follow two opposing stringencies. Seemingly, if you're either going to pick one opinion, then you go with it all the way, and not to do two opposing stringencies. Additionally, a machlek is how to fix a movie that's open to a shusram on both ends. We'll see that it depends actually what the movie before this is actually open to. It might be, we had this machlekes in the previous stuff regarding in general when you have it open to a shusram. We need to see a type of case that is not open to both sides of the shusram. Might be, everyone might agree to what the halacha is. Some of the key terms and concepts are halacha ve'imorikin. The halacha might follow like a certain opinion, but we don't rule like that. Then the interesting machlek is going to come up in today's daf regarding shidra v'golgolis, regarding the spine and the skull. So we have a machlek is b'sham yisrael. When does it lose the ability to be metama ba'ayil? When it loses one vertebrae or two vertebrae, and that's going to come to the discussion regarding which opinion you follow, because in one sense it's going to be leniency, in another sense it's going to be a stringency. The halacha meiser ani, which on the third and the sixth year of a shemitah cycle you give the tithe, the second tithe to the poor person, and the other years you take Meiser Sheni, which is you take, besides the Meiser Rishon you give to the Levi, you separate the tithe from that, you take up the Yerushalayim, or you have to redeem it and take up that money to Yerushalayim. So we're 10 lines down at the top of the Yomim on Zayin and Aleph, where in the middle of this story we brought into the previous stuff. We had, just to quickly review, we had a Hu Mavoi Akum Da'ava Ben Hardah. There was a U-shaped Mavoi in the Hardah, and what was interesting is they required a door on either bend and a side post or a crossbeam, but either one of those two by the entry to a shusram. The Gemara had pointed out that this was a chumr de Rav and a chumr de Shmuel. They were taking the strings of either opinion. On the one hand, they were holding like Rav that defines it as a mavim foolish. Shmuel doesn't. He holds it's mavim sus, and he holds it's considered close. And they were also taking Shmuel's stringency because they were requiring a door on one end of the mavim foolish. That's like Shmuel, because Shmuel rules like Chananya, the name of his hill. Rav does not rule that a mavim foolish requires a door. Rav holds even the mavim that's open on both sides to a shusram only requires a Tursa Pasach. And a lechem ekar doesn't require a door. So it comes out, this they're requiring doors at two bends, and a lechem ekar on either end, was taking the stringency of Rav and taking the stringency of Shmuel. Because according to either one, you wouldn't have that halacha. It's only by taking both. That was the most question in the previous stuff. Do we follow two opposing stringencies? So on that we had, because the question was, we brought a brayso that says, whoever follows chum b'sham and chum b'sil, is a fool walking in darkness. Either opinion you take, you don't take the stringencies of both of them. So the first answer we said in the previous stuff was literally the line right before this that we said that really it's all Rav, because although Rav rules like one opinion, but it's ve'in ma'irikim, we don't actually rule like that. And therefore he is stringent like Chananya, like Ketchila, and therefore he does require doors, and therefore it could be all like that of Rav. But now the Gemara gives a second answer to that question. Because says the Gemara, here we are 10 lines down. He says, halacha umayrin kain. He actually says in the name of Rav, a different version of Rav, that halacha follows like the Tanakama, and we rule like that. That all you need to have is a tzurtzat Pesach and not a door like the Tanakama. So back to the question, Mike, remember what you're going to say. If you hold like that interpretation of Rav, that you don't rule even like a tchil like Chananya. So again, we're back to the question that they contradicted, that you're taking the stringency of both opinions. Rav doesn't hold even like a tchila that it should require a door. So why did they go ahead and use a door? That's only combining with Shmuel. So that Amar Shizvi, he says the second answer. Says, when do we not do the stringencies of two opinions? That's when the two opinions are contradictory. When you have two Tanaim that are disagreeing, one's being more stringent, one's being more lenient. But the reasoning of the one who's stringent over here turns out to be a leniency somewhere else. And the reason why this opinion is lenient over here actually turns out to be stringency somewhere else, whoever's going to do like both those opinions, stringent in either place, that's a fool. Because it's based on one logic, one reasoning. Where over here it comes out to be a stringency, over here it turns out to be a leniency. And if you hold to that reason, then you should do it that reasoning, whether it's lenient or stringent, as the Gemara brings, for example, the following case of the spine and the skull. What is that referring to? Just now, look at the Mishnah says this always. The spine and the skull of a dead person, shechisru, that's lacking. Now that Mishnah is discussing regarding the laws of what's called tumas oil. Tumas oil is when you're in the same overhang, the same house as a mess, so you become tummy just being in the same oil. Now that's only by a full dead person, but let's say a part of the dead person does not contaminate. Now on that the Mishnah there is discussing that how much of the spine and the skull are considered enough of the dead person that it contaminates ba'ayil. So that the machlekes is discussing with how much is the spine going to be missing that it doesn't have the halachic status as a spine anymore. It's just like a regular bone, like that of a barley corn, which does not contaminate ba'ayil. That's what the kama chason b'shedra. We're saying that if it's missing the spine or the skull, it's not a full spine of the skull, then it's not going to contaminate anymore. Says the Mishnah, how much is the spine going to be missing? That's not considered a spine anymore. It's not intact. It's just like a bone, which a bone does not contaminate ba'ayil. So in machlekes, Beishamim they say shtei chulias. That of if it's missing 2 vertebrae, then it's not a spine anymore. Ubeisiloimim chuliyachas. Beisil say 1 vertebrae. So who's the lenient interpretation over here? Who's being more stringent? Who's being more lenient? We're saying that a spine contaminates ba'ayil. So who's being more stringent? It's Beishamim. Beishamim say it's still a spine to be metame if it lost 1 vertebrae. Only if it loses 2 vertebrae, it's not a spine. Beisil is more lenient. They say that already once it loses 1 vertebrae, it's not going to be tam ba'ayil. Now, and regarding a skull, we have machlekes also. Beishamim they say kamoli magdech. However much is the amount that you could drill with a drill. And the Gemara also discusses what type of drill, but as the amount you would drill into a skull and it would be losing that amount of the skull, that would say it's not a skull anymore. Or some they say which is the Gemara discusses this, how much this is in Masechtas Becharos in the 3rd parak, how much would be taken away from the skull of a living person that he would die. But be that as it may, that's one machlekes we have. In the context of how much is, let's say we'll take the case of the spine, what's considered deficient or not deficient? In the context of Tumas Oil. Now, Ba'amar B'Yud Mishmoli says, B'chimin Treifa. He says, the same thing applies regarding the laws of Treifa, that is, meaning the same halachic concepts to Beishamai and Bishil, that Beishamai says is not considered deficient unless it's missing 2 vertebrae. If it's missing 1 vertebrae, it's still going to be tam ba'ayil. So by Treifa also, Beishamai is being lenient over there. They say, if let's say it's missing 1 vertebrae from the spine, it's still kosher, it's not Treifa. Because Beishamai holds that what's considered chumrah by mess, that it's still going to be a spine to tamas ba'ayil, is a validity by kashrus, because it's still considered that its spine is still okay if it's missing 1 vertebrae. Now, Bishil that say that with 1 vertebrae missing, it's considered missing, deficient, and if it's a leniency by tamas oil, that's a stringency in the laws of tarfus. Because now that you're missing 1 vertebrae, Bishil says, no, it's not a spine anymore. It's treif, it's not going to survive, it's not going to live. So whoever's going to follow Bishil by the laws of tarfus, and to say, it's missing 1 vertebrae, it's not kosher. And by Beishamai, he's going to follow by mess, like Beishamai is going to say, it's still going to be a tam ba'ayil, up until it misses 2 vertebrae. You're a fool, because they're contradictory. Is it considered deficient, or it's not? Either it is deficient or it's not. How can you follow both stringencies? It's contradictory. How can you say that you're following that logic? That's considered a fool. That's where we don't take 2 opinions. But when they don't contradict each other, like in our case, where the machlekes Rav and Shmuel in these 2 different halachas were 2 different arenas. They were not the same svara. One was regarding what's called a mavi akum, a bent mavi. So then Rav held it's like mafulish. But that's not related to the other halacha of in general by a mavi mafulish. What are you misaking it? It just happened to be a combined case. But that's a different thing, where Shmuel holds you have to have a door. And they're not contradictory, those stringencies. And that's where Abdin, and that's where you could do like 2 stringencies. Here, they're contradictory. It's either one or the other. Here, according to Beishamai, by the animal, when it's missing 1 vertebrae, it's not deficient. So by animal, it's going to be a leniency. And by human, it's going to be a stringency. Beis Hill, it says 1 vertebrae is going to be efficient. So you're going to say, by animal, it's going to be a treifa, and human, it's going to be cooler. So that's a contradictory to say both. But when that you can't say. But by the Mavoi Okum, by the U-shaped Mavoi, then it does not contradict. The Chumrah of adjusting with doors and the Chumrah of considering Mavoi Mafulish are 2 separate ideas. They just happen to be together in this case, but it's not contradictory, and therefore that's the Gemara's answer. The second answer for how could the people of Nagda have made doors by the bends? Why not? You could follow the stringent of either opinion when they don't contradict each other. But then the Gemara asks, it says, wait a second. Is that really true where they don't contradict? Then you don't go, when they do contradict, then you don't follow the both stringencies? But Masar Mashashi asked in the following brayso. When we say esrog, it means the whole tree. The tree is called the esrog. He harvested an esrog tree. The echad b'shvat, on the first day of Shvat, the noid by Beis, he went and he did 2 meisters, 2 different types of meisters, besides meister rishon, on that esrog tree. Why? Because this was the end of the 2nd year of the Shemitah cycle, going into the 3rd year. Now, when is the Rosh Hashanah li'ilanois? It's machlekes b'sham Beis Hill. Beis Shammai, this was the second year of Shemitah. In the first and second year, you give Meiser Sheni. In the third year, you give Meiser Rishon and Meiser Ani. So what he did was, he took two different types. Echad Kedei Beis Shammai, he took Meiser Ani, like Beis Shammai, who Beis Shammai holds that it's the first day of Shvat, is Rosh Hashanah Lilonis. They was already in the third year on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. The Echad Kedei Beis Hillel. And then he went and he took Meiser Sheni, like the Beis Hillel, because Beis Hillel holds, no, it's only Chamisha Asar B'Shvat is considered the Rosh Hashanah. So it's still considered the second year. So he went and he took off Meiser Sheni and Meiser Ani. Wait a second, that's contradictory. Either it's the new year or it's not. You told me that when they're contradictory, then you don't follow both stringencies. How's he doing Meiser Sheni and Meiser Ani, Meiser Sheni? It's either a new year or it's not, and that's contradictory to do like those two stringencies. How did he go ahead and take both of them? So the Gemara says no. Rabbi Kiva Gemara is topically. His tradition was in doubt. He really wanted to follow totally like Beis Hillel. He didn't know. Beis Hillel, what was Beis Hillel's opinion? Was it B'chad B'Shvat Amar? Was it the first of Shvat? B'chamesh B'Shvat Amar? Was it the fifth in the Shvat? And therefore he went strictly both, but not because he was following Beis Hillel. He just wasn't sure about what was the opinion of Beis Hillel, and therefore he went and he did Meiser Sheni and Meiser Ani. But of course, when they're contradictory, we don't do like both. Now, continuing what we had spoken about in the previous daf, we had brought a brisa, which originally the brisa said Ketzim Arba Rosh Hashanah, which we said is not with Rosh Hashanah, because no one agrees you can Arba Rosh Hashanah, and for sure not with just with a door and a lechet akayim. So we explained it was talking about a mavi mafosh. We spoke about that if the mavi is open on either side, but a machlekes Tanakama and Chananya, the way he explains for Beis Hillel. Tanakama says you make a tzurza pasach, a door frame on one side, and you have a side post or a crossbeam on the other side, and that's how Rav ruled. Chananya said the name of Beis Hillel, and he had a different opinion in the name of Beis Shammai, that you make a door on one side and a lechet akar on the other side. And that's how Shmuel ruled, Shmuel like Chananya. So regarding that halacha, the Gemara introduces the following teaching. Yosef, Rabbi Yosef, Kamei de Rav Huna. The Yosef come and he was saying, the Amar Rav, he says the whole machlokes that we have over here, between that of the by the Mavim before, so on both sides between the Tanakama and Chananya, that's only B'Sirati Mikan, B'Sirati Mikan. You have a highway on one side, a highway on the other side, or Upalati Mikan, the Palati Mikan, where both these are Rosh Hashanah. Like the Gemara says in Shabbos Avav Manav, what's considered Rosh Hashanah? Stratya Platya. What's Siratya? So that's where, like we call the Rosh Hashanah, where you have the main streets. And what's Platya? It's like the marketplace, but both of them are Rosh Hashanah. So what our Gemara is telling us is that if it's open on either side, this alleyway, which is where the courtyard would open up to, on both sides it's flush with Rosh Hashanah. That's where Chananya disagrees, and he says, okay, it's open to Rosh Hashanah on both sides, you gotta have a door. Avol, but let's say Saratya Mikan, Ubika Mikan. Let's say one side opens up to a street, but the other side opens up into an open field, which halachically that's a carmelist, that's only rabbinically forbidden. Oh, Ubika Mikan, Ubika Mikan. Let's say either side is open up to a field. Then everyone would agree, even Chananya, that all you have to do is make a door frame on one side. You don't have to make a door. And you put a crossbeam or a side post on this other side, because it's not open to Rosh Hashanah on both sides. So the Gemara just asks on the wording of this teaching of Eruvin Daf. It says, wait a second. Hashta Srati Mikan Mikan, be telling me that even if one side is a street and the other side of the field, that isolates Tzurza Besa Mikan, it's enough to make a Tzurza Besa on one side. But Lecha Mikan Mikan to put a crossbeam on the other one. So Bika Mikan, but why do you have to say the case when it opens to both sides of the field? So obviously, if one side of the field is enough, for sure both sides are enough. Says the Gemara, and Taisa explains it's not the chiddush to say that you need to even have a Tzurza Besa. It sounds like they were saying that it's enough with that. It's enough with that, so then what's the chiddush? Says the Gemara, you're right, this is what we're coming to say. Srati Mikan, the Bika Mikan, when you have the street on one side and the field on the other side, Nasir Bika Mikan, the Bika Mikan, it's like you have a field on the other side, and that's what we're saying, it's enough to make Tzurza Pesach on one side and let it occur on the other side. You don't have to make, the way Chananya holds, when it's open to both sides of Shusharam, to make a door. No, it's enough to make a Tzurza Pesach. Now, the difficult part is the next part of the statement. This takes us to the end of the daf, and this was Rav Yosef, who was saying over, he was sitting in front of Rav Huna, he was saying over this teaching of Yehuda Marav. So on that says the Gemara Messiah. But Rav Yosef concluded this that he was saying over Mishmeid Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Rabbi Yehuda. But he didn't specify. Rabbi Yehuda did not tell Rabbi Yosef who did he have this tradition of this next halacha that he was telling him. Meaning in the first version, in the first teaching that we just said right now, he said in the name of Rav, Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. This next teaching, Rabbi Yehuda had said to Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yosef was saying over, he didn't tell him who said this. What was this halacha? He said the following teaching. If the end of this mavoi, and this is where the visuals, I said this to someone after the shiur just before. It says, yeah, if you're a visual person, you have to be looking at the pictures. If you're looking at the Gemara, you're a Gemara, it depends what type of learning you want, but sometimes you need the visual. So the end of the Mavi, the end of the alleyway that was open to Rosh Hashanah, if let's say that ended on the other side, Kal Rechava, it ended in a Rechava. Now what's a Rechava? Rechava is the area, like it's like basically your backyard. The Chatzar that we always call Chatzar is the front yard. Rechava is the open area that's enclosed on all four sides behind the house. And that's significant, as we'll shortly explain. So it ends into the people's backyards. So then the halacha is, now the way the Rechava usually works is that meaning through the alleyway goes through the backyard, and the Rashi explains, and as some Gemaras have this picture also in Rashi, that the wall over here was also breached to Rosh Hashanah. So this Mavi, the alleyway ends in this Rechava, this backyard, but that actually continues, and there's a breach over here and going into Rosh Hashanah. So what was this teaching of you? He says, you know what the halacha is? Einay tzarech klum. You don't have to do anything for where the Mavi opens up into that Rechava, into the backyard. All you have to do is you have to put by where it opens up to Rosh Hashanah, a lechi or a kaira, the way a regular closed Mavi would be. This is considered like a closed Mavi. Now, I'll just explain it, but I'll say quickly the way Rashi explains, how do we know that it's talking about that this area, because the Gemara doesn't tell us, that this area over here from the Rechava is breached to the Rosh Hashanah, and that it's coming to teach us this chiddush of that even though it's mafulish, is because if this was closed, says Rashi, then obviously, of course this is a closed Mavi. And you wouldn't have to tell me that because of the people here in the backyard, that they don't make it forbidden on the people of the Mavi, even if they didn't make an Eir with them, says Rashi, because that's obvious. Because the Rechava does not need to be part of an Eir, because generally in the backyard, people don't usually go in the backyard. Talmudic times, people don't use their backyards. They only use their chatzeres, the front yard. Backyards where they would store things, and people don't usually use that area, as the Gemara says, that whoever's allowed to carry from the Mavi into it is because there's no diur, no one dwells in their backyard. Now halacha follows like that opinion, that we always rule like that, Rav is stringent, Rabbi is lenient, and halacha is like Rabbi, and that halacha, that Rechava is not a problem. So therefore, this halacha is not because, if this was not breached, we wouldn't be telling you any chiddush. And additionally, Rashi says that this that we're saying that it's a Rechava is not specifically, and really the truth would be even for a chatzar that has dwellers and they made an Erev. It's just that the story happened to have been, as we'll see in Amud Beis, that it was with a Rechava as it was in the village of shepherds. But again, to understand the way it worked in Talmudic times was people would normally only use their front yards. The backyard was not used. There was no one that lived there. They didn't use it. They didn't have swings and whatever in their backyard. They didn't use that here.
Only if it's closed. Here, it's open in the backyard.
Yeah, I'm saying, but this is the back. This is like, I don't know if the picture is exact, but I'm saying that the back is they didn't use it, and then the backyard. In other words, this is the back. Essentially, what this picture is trying to show you, this is their backyard. This is their front yard or whatever. This was their front yard. This is the backyard, and they didn't use this area. That's what's called the Rechava. And the Mavi is going into the Rechava, which is open to the Rosh Hashanah.
What's so important if they use it or not? So she's shiur, no?
No, it's going to be important is because there's halacha that when you open to another area, you can make it usher because you didn't make an Erev together. Because this is a Mavi and this is someone's backyard. So we'll explain this on the base. That could be problematic. And that's a Rashi forewarning that no, that wouldn't be a problem. And therefore, what would be the chiddush? Obviously, the chiddush is that we're talking about this back wall is open also. And it's mefulish. And still we're saying that it's considered like it's closed. And all you have to do is make a lechem curry here and nothing more. That's the halacha. That was our teaching of Rabbi Yosef that he heard from Rabbi Yehuda. Now, on that, on that, by Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yosef to Rabbi Yosef, this teaching that you concluded in the name of the Rabbi Yehuda, and he didn't tell you who he had received this teaching from, like he did in his first teaching, that he said in the name of Rab. This conclusionary teaching must be the Shmuel. Must have been Rabbi Yehuda had two rabbis. He had first learned by Rab, then he went to Shmuel. Must have been he learned this teaching from Shmuel. Why? As we think of it, because the either Rab, if you would think that he had learned this from Rab, then Kasha the Rab V'Tarki. We would have a contradiction with Rab on two different points. Why? Well, we would do this contradiction with a different teaching of Rab. Rav said the following halacha: Mavai shenifretz b'milua. A mavai that's totally breached, meaning the back wall. This is going to look very similar. It's just fundamentally different, but in a way it's the same exact case. A mavai that's totally breached in the back wall, totally l'chatzer to a courtyard. Remember, chatzer is different than a rechava. To a courtyard, the nifretz chatzer kenegda, and the chatzer is also breached opposite that, going to the Rosh Hashanah. But it's less than 10 amas, so therefore it's not considered as a breach. It's considered like a pesach. So what's the halacha? So Rav says like this. He says, Chatzer mutaris. The courtyard is permitted over here because for the Chatzer, it's not totally breached to the Mavli because you have what's called Gifufin. We're going to learn a lot of these concepts as we go along with Masechtas Eruvin. There's walls over here on either side. So for the people in the Chatzer, this is like an entryway. So therefore it's considered Pesach. Moreover, the people in the Mavli who walk in the alleyway, they don't make it forbidden on the people in the Chatzer because they don't have a right of way into the Chatzer. So they're not considered like as if they're part of this. They have no right of way into this guy's yard. So they're not going to be considered as if they could be here, because if they would be, then you didn't make an Eruv together, they would make it forbidden. But the Chatzeris make it forbidden to the people in the Mavli because they have a right of way through the alleyway. And that's called Drisas Ragleim. They can walk over here. Now, the Rosh Hashanah also does not make it forbidden for the Chatzer that's over here, because that we said since less than 10 Amos, it's a Pesach. So the Chatzer people are good. The Chatzer is mutar. But, Umavli Asa. This is where it gets a little bit complicated. The people for the Mavli are forbidden. They can't use this as a regular Mavli with this Lechi B'Kar. Now, why is this? So we assume right now, from the fact that the words of the teaching of Rav had said, V'nifrit Zachatzer connected, the words were that, this Mavli is open to the Chatzer, and the Chatzer is breached opposite on its back wall to the Rosh Hashanah. So what does that sound like it's saying? Because it looks like now that the Mavli is mafulish. Why are you telling me the back wall here is open up? Why you come and tell me the Mavli is asa, right? Just say because it's open to the Chatzer. No, you're not saying that. You're saying, the back wall is breached. So that sounds like, so it sounds like, okay, so it's open on either side to Rosh Hashanah. That's why it's forbidden. And therefore, Lech B'Kar is not going to work. Because it's open to the Rosh Hashanah on either side. And not because it's open to the Chatzer. Because if the reason was that because it's totally breached to the Chatzer, then don't tell me about the back wall. Now, the thing is, Rabbi Yehuda, when he said his case on Omen Aleph, he spoke about a rechava, about the backyard. He was telling us, in that case, in the backyard, regarding this picture, Rabbi Yehuda had told us that this halacha, that the Mavli is going to be permitted. Rabbi Yehuda's case, when it opens up to the rechava, into the backyard. Now wait a second, backyard, and you told me, and Rashi had proved that unless we're talking about that it's open in that back wall also, wait a second, that's mafulish. Obviously mafulish is not a problem. Contradiction number 1. Right? Because you say mafulish is not a problem. Who can run through a Chatzer or a rechava? It's open, it goes through some other property, and it's open all the way. Additionally, the second point is, the rechava that Rabbi Yehuda spoke about, no one dwells over here. And as I said, it's going to be important. No one is in the rechava. No one uses that area. So there's no diurin, there's no dwellers over here that are going to be walking here to make it forbidden on the Mavli. But it sounds like if Rabbi Yehuda's case was told about a Chatzer, it would have been forbidden. Why is he picking a rechava for? Why is he picking a backyard for? In Talmudic times it was more common to use a Chatzer. Why did you say the case of a Chatzer? Because a Chatzer would have been forbidden. And the Gemara later is going to explain the reasoning. But that's where we have a difficulty on Rav on both points. Point number 1 is Rav had said Mavli nifetz b'melul Chatzer nifetz Chatzer kenegdai that you can't carry in the Mavli. That's not like Rabbi Yehuda. Why isn't it like Rabbi Yehuda? Because Rabbi Yehuda holds that the fact that it's mafulish is not a problem. And the second point that was difficult is because as the Gemara V'amai, why is this Lavika shekol l'rechava? This should be like Rabbi Yehuda's case where it goes open to a backyard. In other words, as we're saying on both points, if it's because of mafulish, Rav makes it sound like the problem is mafulish because he says the nifetz Chatzer connected, the Chatzer is open to the back wall. Who cares? So because mafulish, the Yehuda is not bothered by mafulish. And if regarding the fact that it's breached to the Chatzer, and therefore the Rabbi Yehuda holds, why do you pick the case of Rechava of the backyard? It sounds like according to Rabbi Yehuda, if it was open to a Chatzer, it would be forbidden.
Why?
Because it's open to a Rishus that's forbidden, because they didn't make an Eruv together. This is considered 2 different domains. There's people who live over here, who don't live over here. The people in the Mavli are going to be forbidden because other people are coming in over here.
That Chutzah As is all of
Yes, the Chatzer, the people over here, they're coming in over here. They didn't make an Eruv. If the Mavli is its own distinct area, fine. But you're not. You have a Chatzer that's open into that. They're totally open to the Mavli. It's the point because it's nifetz b'milu. It's totally open to the Chatzer. So it sounds like that Rav had made it sound like, no, that wouldn't be a problem. Because that's why I have to say it's nifetz Chatzer kenegdai. So They're contradictory on 2 points, on opposite points. On the foolish, Rabbi Yehuda makes it sound like it's not a problem. Rav makes it sound like it is a problem. And regarding the fact that it's nifritz l'chatzer, Rabbi Yehuda makes it sound like it is the problem, and Rav makes it sound like that's not a problem. So there's 2 contradictions. What's your point?
Carry from Eruv to Eruv, make an Eruv.
You can make Eruvin, but they didn't. That's what I'm saying. The point is that the nifritz to rishus that's aser, and therefore it would make it forbidden. So the way the case was described, it seems to be that you can't say this teaching of Yehuda was Rav, because then it would be contradicting on 2 points.
From the picture, it seems like that the only access to the people living in the back is through the Mavi. So why don't we consider them as part of the Mavi?
If they would be part of the Mavi, if they would
what
make
makes them not part of the Mavi?
Because it's a different domain. There's some people learn this.
Why is that chotzer different than the chatzayim on the side? Because
not necessarily would it be. We're just talking about that if you didn't make any Eruv. If you made an Eruv, yes, there would be. And we're actually going to learn about this point in a second. We're talking about, let's say, no Eruv was made. So the Mavi itself, are you allowed to carry in the Mavi? A Mavi itself, let's say unrelated to any Chatzeres. If you make a Lechem Ekayr, if it's a Mavi Sas.
You also have to make a
that's something else. That's Eruv Chatzeres, if you want to carry from the Chatzeres into the Mavi. But let's say just the Mavi. Imagine there's nothing else. Let's say it's only the alleyway. Now, alleyway is when Chatzeres and Batim open them into it. But let's say just the Mavi. So a Mavi Sasim, you can make just a Lechem Ekayr. A Mavi Mefulish, you have to make a Tzur Pesach on one side and whatever, and a Lechem Ekayr on the other side. Here, it's not just a Mavi. You have this Chatzor that's open up into it. It's not just like over here where there's a Pesach. Here's totally breached to it.
It's no Pesach, okay.
It's a totally breached to it. So it sounds like from Yehuda that would be a problem. It sounds like from Rav that wouldn't be a problem. So it can't be Yehuda's teaching was Rav. That was the Gemara saying on 2 points.
Does that breach have to have a certain minute? So it's more than 10 amos? Is that it?
It's what's called nifritz b'miluah. If it's totally open, then it's not considered a Pesach.
If there would be even a stick of wall there.
Here, that's the point. This place is discussed at length, and we'll see this in this Masechta. What's called nir mechutz v'loy in nir mebifnim. We can discuss it on later dafim. The people in the Chatzor, they have walls on either side. The Mavi goes straight into the Chatzor. From nifritz b'miluah. So the people are like part of it, and they're not Eruv with them, so it's going to make it forbidden. So that's the 2 questions. And then Amalei, so Rabbi Yisrael said Dabaya, he says, okay. He says, Anole Yadan, he says, I don't know who he learned it from. I just know there was such a story that happened in the village of the shepherds. There was a Mavi Shekol or a Chavav. There was a Mavi that opened up into, and this was Rabbi Huda's teaching. It opened up into the backyards of that was behind the Mavi, and that backyard was breached to the wall behind it. They came around the Yehuda. He didn't require them to do anything by this point. All he said was to have a Lechem Ekayr. Now, so Rabbi Yisrael says Talmud Abaye, and if it's difficult to say in the name of Rav, okay, Kav Mishmei Shmuel. Let it be name of Shmuel, but the and there's no difficulty. Let it be Shmuel, because you're right. If it was Rav, it would be contradiction. But the Gemara is not finished, and this is the last point of the Gemara. The Gemara says that no, Hashadom le Rav Sheish Rav Shmuel bar Abba. Rabbi, some say it's Rav Yisrael bar Abba. The Rav Sheish said, he says, I'm going to teach you this teaching of Rav. This teaching that said that if it's breached to the Chatzor, the Mavi is going to be forbidden. I actually says Rav Sheshes, I learned from Rav that it depends. Kan she'irvu, kan she'lo yirvu. In other words, as Rashi says, what does this mean? When Rav had said that the Mavi is going to be forbidden, it depends. Sometimes it will be forbidden, sometimes it will be permitted. And this is what people were bringing up. If the people of the Chatzor had made an Eruv with the people of the Mavi, which none of these pictures show yet, because it's showing that no Eruv is required, it's going to be the same thing. But if they had made an Eruv, then actually it's permitted to carry in the Mavi. Because this that Rav had said it's going to be forbidden is not because of Mefulish. It's not because it's opened up into the Rishus Ram behind it. As the Gemara is going to explain later on, we're actually talking about that this breach in this back wall is not flush with this wall over here. It's what's called Zeh Shaloi Keneged Zeh. Let's say this opening is over here, and this opening is over here. So then why? The whole question was based on because Rav had said the words Nifritz Achatz Keneged. We were wondering, we said, why are you saying that? If the problem was like the way Rav Yehuda holds because it's breached to this, then why are you saying this back wall is closed? So Rashi tells us because of the Chiddush of the Chatzor, not for the Mavi. Mavi is not because of the Mefulish. Mavi is because of the Chatzor. You're right, it wouldn't be a problem because of Mefulish, the way Rabbi Yehuda says it. It's to tell you that even though people are constantly walking in through the street to this street, they're cutting through your yard, still is going to be permitted because since the breach is less than 10 amas, it's considered like a Pesach to the Chatzor and not like a breach. That's why we said the nifetz chatzah connected for the chatzah, not for the mavoi. Because regarding the issue of the mavoi, it's not because of the breach of the wall behind it. Rather, it's because the people in the chatzah are making forbidden on the people in the mavoi when you didn't make an eruv. The reason for this is because since the mavoi is totally open to the chatzah, that's considered breached, and therefore the dwellers of the chatzah make it forbidden on the people in the mavoi. But the people in the mavoi do not make it forbidden on the people of the chatzah. As the Gemara is going to tell us later on the Tzadik Beis and Aleph, there's an interesting case that the Gemara is going to talk about. It's called chatzah gedol shniftzur lekatana. Let's say you have someone who has a huge property, and someone right next to him has a small property. So we say that the people of the smaller property are going to be forbidden because they're totally breached to the larger property. Whereas the smaller people don't make this larger property forbidden because that's like a pesach. In other words, essentially like this case. This would be the chatzah gedol, this would be the chatzah ketana. They're forbidden because they're totally breached to them, but they wouldn't be because for them, it's like a pesach. As the Gemara tells us later on, when the wall is breached, up until Tanamas, if you want, you could make it like a separate areas. If you want, you could make it one area because it's considered like a pesach, and therefore both would be permitted. So essentially, the Gemara says, based on this teaching of Rav Sheshes, I could tell you why Dirav Namalei Kasha. That it could even be like that the Yehuda's teaching by the villagers of the shepherds was like Rav. And the reason for this is because Khan, by the story of Rabbi Yehuda, where shiur b'nei chatzir and b'nei mavoi. It's not really these exact words, but it's like the case of where the people of chatzir made an eruv with the people of mavoi, that then it would be permitted. But actually, the case of there, if you recall, and this is very important, that's why I pointed out, was over to a rechava, into a backyard. Nobody lives in the backyard to make it usher on the people in the mavoi. So essentially, it is like Iruv. What's the point of Iruv? Iruv is to make that there's no dwellers over here making forbidden. A rechava is the same thing like Iruv because there are no dwellers to make it forbidden on the people of the mavoi. Kan Rav Yirmiyah Bar Abba's teaching him of Rav was Shaloi Iruv, where they did not make an Eruv. If they didn't make an Eruv, the reason why it's forbidden is because the people of the chatzah and the people of the mavoi. So essentially, we resolved both questions. It's not difficult on Rav. Because the assumption we had made of shenifetz chatzah connected was not because of the mavoi to make him a foolish. No, Rav holds the way Rabbi Yehuda had said. There's no problem over here of the fact that it's open up into Rosh Hashanah. That itself, the way Rabbi Yehuda had said, would not make it a problem. Ain't tzarich l'klum, because we don't consider it as mefulish. We consider it as sasim, as closed off. Because the fact that it's open up, who cares? That's a Pesach. It's opening up into it's the end of the cul-de-sac. It's some guy's yard. So that's not a problem. And Rav holds like that. So why did Rav say in this case that it's nifetz chatzah kenegdai? That was not for the people of the mavoi. It's not because of mefulish. Mefulish is not a problem. That's for the people in the chatzah. Which that's a chiddush to say that even for them they could carry and they have no problem because on this side it's not a problem because they have these gefufi, they have these things. So it's like a pesach. Here it's also like a pesach. So even though people in Rosh Hashanah cut through because it goes from this street to this street, people say, that's not going to be a problem. Now, and so what is the problem? So then why did Rabbi Yehuda say in the case of Rechav it's mutar by chatzah is going to be forbidden, and Rav is saying that chatzah is going to, how do we resolve that? So he said it depends if you made an eruv or not. When did Rav say it's going to be a problem is when they didn't make an eruv. They didn't make an eruv, so the mother's going to be usher. When was the story of Rabbi Yehuda that it's going to be permitted? Is either when you make an eruv or when no eruv is required because opening into Rechava, which is a backyard, you don't need an eruv because it's closed. And the fact that someone's backyard, who cares? If no one lives, there's no diurin to make it usher on the people in the mother. Something that's discussed in today's Daf and Eruvin Daf Zayin was we continued with the story from the previous Daf. We had a mavoi akum in our Daf, which was a ches, a U-shaped mavoi. And they required to have doors on either bend. Now, according to Rav Ada Bar Hava Amar Rav, that he holds, that Rav holds, that actually the halacha is like the Tanna Kama, and we actually rule like the Tanna Kama. So the first answer had said, really, he says halacha is like that, but we don't rule like that. So therefore, he really holds like Chananya, and therefore that's why it's not Trei Chumri. But according to the version that holds that, no, he actually says the halacha is like Tanna Kama. So what are you going to say? Those are two stringencies. You're like a fool. Why would you say to put up two doors? What do you mean? Rav holds always like Tanna Kama, that even by a mavoi mefulish, all you have to do is put up a tzuras HaPesach. And the only reason why you're calling it is mefulish like Rav. Shmuel doesn't hold that it's considered mefulish, so even Shmuel holds like a chanan, you put up doors, wouldn't say it's mefulish. So how are you putting up doors? It's trei chumri. So the Gemara says, we only don't do like two strings only when they contradict each other. What's a case that they contradict? For example, the two halachas that come up by a missing of this, let's say, the skull and the spine. there's two halachic contextual frameworks for this idea. One is by Tumas Oil HaMes, and the second one is by Treif. So in Machlekes Beisham Yisrael, what's considered deficient in the spine? Is it one vertebrae or is it two? Beisil said one. Now, if you're going to say that you hold like Beisil regarding Tumas Oil that it's one, so then you can't say like Beishami the other one that it's two because it's either one deficient or two is deficient. You can't say like the stringency regarding Tumas Oil to say, oh, they haven't been hold like Beishami. That's only deficient with two. One's not deficient, so it's Tumat Oil. When it comes to Treifis, then the animal was missing one vertebrae. Then suddenly I hold like Beisil, that's a chumrah. It's contradictory. Either it's deficient or it's not. But regarding our case, where it's not contradictory, just one's regarding is a maveh akam like mafulish or not, and then in a maveh mafulish, what's halacha? Those are not contradictory chumras, and therefore that's why they're able to do both. Rabbi Kiva, when they did two maestras, when he harvested his esek tree on the first of Shvat, and that's contradictory. Either it's the new year or it's not. Either it's maestri and maestri only. How do you take both? It's because actually he was in doubt regarding this hill. He was not going like Beis Shammai and Beis Hill. He didn't know did Beis Hill hold that's the first of Shvat or two of Shvat, and therefore he was stringent, but not because he was following two contradictory opinions. Then the next case, which took us to the end of the daf, Rabbi Yosef was sitting in front of Rav Huna. He said over teaching of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav. That was the first teaching, which was we had a machlekes in the previous daf regarding a mavli that's mafulish. There's Shasarabim. We had a machlekes Tanakama and Chananya. Tanakama had said all you need to have is a tzurza pesach and a lechem b'kar. Chananya says you need to have a door and a lechem b'kar. And we had a machlekes Rav and Shmuel who we rule like. Now on that Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Rav. But let's say the mavli is open on both sides to a Shasarabim. That's where you could say the halacha. But if let's say it's open on one side to a open field, which is a carmelist, then according to everyone, even according to Chananya, all you would have to have would be a tzurza pesach on one side and a lechem b'kar. You would not have to have a door, according to everyone, because one side is open to a field, not to a Shasarabim. Now, this is where it got tricky. This was the end of the daf. Rabbi Yosef ended off saying in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda didn't say who this teaching was from. He said the following halacha. He says, if you have a mavin, an alleyway, that ends in someone's backyard, Rechava is backyard, and again, Talmudic times they didn't really use backyard. No one spent time with it. So he said that in its klum, you don't need to have anything by that entryway. That where it opened up to the backyard, you didn't have to do anything over there by the tzad Rechava. Now, even though the back wall, as Rashi had proved that, of the Rechava was breached to Rosh Hashanah, that's okay. So you have over there the alleyway, and this the mavli is open up to someone's backyard over here, and this is breached over here. This is open. You don't have to do anything over here. That was Allah Chavina. Now, Abaye wanted to prove. He said, "Oh, you have to say that this is Shmuel." Even though the first teaching was Eruvin and Rab, this can't be like Rab. It would be like Rab. You have 2 points that are contradictory with another teaching of Rab. Because what was the other teaching of Rabbi and Rabbi in the name of Rav was the following halacha. Again, a mavli, an alleyway, that's breached, meaning nifetz b'milu means it opens totally into a chatzar, someone's front yard. And that chatzar is breached opposite its back wall into the shusharam. So it sounds like the same type of a case, just one's a rechava and one's a chatzar. What did Rav teach? He taught that the chatzar is going to be permitted, that's okay. It still maintains its status as a chatzar. The mavli is going to be usher. It's not like a regular mavli that you could permit with a lechem b'kar. Now, what's the 2 contradictions? Rabbi Yehuda said that mefulish is not a problem when it's going through, let's say, someone's yard. That's what he said. He said that the mavli is okay. All you got to do is a lechem b'kar on one end, like a closed mavli, and the fact that it ends in someone's backyard, and that backyard is open in the back, it doesn't make a difference. So even though it's mefulish, people are crossing through from one street to the other street. That's okay. The problem is, Rav had said, "V'nifetz a chatzah kenegdoi." That's why the mavli. So wait a second. That's why the mavli is forbidden, because the chatzah is nifetz kenegdoi. It sounds like because he has a problem with mefulish. Because since you're going, the mavli opens up into that guy's chatzah, which then opens up to the street. Why are you saying v'nifetz a chatzah kenegdoi? Why are you saying the back wall's open? Because that's why the mavli is forbidden. So you see, holds mefulish is a problem. Contradiction number 1. Is mefulish a problem or not? What was contradiction number 2? The fact that it's open to the chatzah, don't get confused. Nifetz lechatzah, not nifetz chatzah kenegdoi, not the back wall of the chatzah. The fact that the mavli opens into the chatzah. According to Yehuda, obviously that would be a problem. Why would that be a problem? Because he only permits his case of the mavli in a rechava in the backyard. Why are you picking backyard? Obviously because in a chatzir, in the front yard, it would be a problem. Why was it in a chatzir or a chava? Because chatzir have the urine. People live over there. Oh, so they're always walking over there. They're going to make it problematic for the Mali. The problem is, Rav obviously did not hold that's a problem. Because why did he say the Mavi is forbidden? Because it's foolish. And that's why he said that nifetz chatzir kenegdai. Why are you saying that? Don't say nifetz chatzir kenegdai. It's open to a chatzir. Obviously, you're not bothered nifetz chatzir. So that's two contradictions. It can't be Rav. Rabbi Yehuda must have said that teaching name of Shmuel. But the Gemara concludes, says no, it's not true. It's not difficult to say if it's Rav. Because the words that Rav Sheshet had a tradition that he had said over, he said, I heard from Rav that this teaching depends if she'irvu or shalai irvu. What does that mean? How is this? Rabbi Yehuda's teaching, yes, it could be the name of Rav. Because that was she'irvu, again, it wasn't really irvu, but we'll explain it like that. The people of the Chatzar had made an Erev with the people of the Mavoi. Okay, there's no problem if they made an Erev. So the Mavoi is okay. Now, although in this case they didn't make an Erev, but a Rechava, a backyard, since there's no one living over there, it's like She'irvu. It's the same thing. What's an Erev to do? Erev makes that the people over there are not problematic on this area. No one's there anyway. So Rechava, yes, Rav would agree, because he had said, my halacha is only Shalai Yirvu. That's what he told Rav Sheshet. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda could be like Rav. Now, Rabbi Yehuda that he had said in the name of Rav, that the chatzir, that the Mav is going to be aser, is because there was no Erev done. And no Erev is done, so the dwellers of the chatzir are making it forbidden. Why do you say nifetz chatzir kenegdi? Why do you say the back wall of the chatzir is open? It has nothing to do with that. It's because it's open to the chatzir. That was for a different condition, as Rashi tells us, because to tell you that the chatzir is not forbidden. So even though everyone's coming through this guy's yard, it doesn't make a difference. In the Mavi side, he has a Pesach, because it's not totally nifetz b'malui. Only the Mavi is totally open, but he has walls on either side. And the fact in the back, where it's open to Rosh Hashanah, is also less than 10 amos. So that's also a Pesach. So the Chiddush of nifetz chatzir kenegdai was the Chiddush in the Chatzir, but really, the both teachings are in the name of Rav, and Rav holds Mefulish is not a problem. And the real problem is that it's open to the Chatzir. And because there's the urine, and the Rechava has no diurin, and therefore that's why Yehuda said it's mutter, even though he's going like Rav. Thank you to any time for hosting us.